Welcome to episode 57 of the Southern Conservative Podcast. My name is Ty. Programming note, there will only be podcasts today and tomorrow this week, and then podcasts will resume on Tuesday. I hope everyone will have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend, and I hope everybody takes time to remember our fallen heroes who gave their lives so that we can continue to enjoy our freedom and liberty. So much has happened since the last podcast a week ago. I talked about how media outlets had been reporting about an informant or spy within the Trump campaign. Some had already revealed the informant's name. His name is Stefan Halper. He's a 73-year-old British professor with ties to the MI6 and the CIA and FBI. We now know that Halper had contact with at least 3 people inside Trump's campaign. These people are Carter Page, George Papadopoulos, and Sam Clovis. Now, the first we learned of the Trump-Russia collusion investigation is when we learned of the salacious Christopher Steele dossier. That dossier was used by the FBI to get a FISA warrant to spy on Carter Page. The first FISA warrant was obtained on October 21, 2016, and was subsequently renewed 3 times. As Sarah Carter has recently reported, and as I've been telling you, these warrants must be renewed every 90 days. But any evidence that was gathered from previous warrants must be presented in order to seek a new warrant. That means the final warrant, the one that was issued in June 2017. The application of such warrant that was signed by Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein must contain all of the evidence collected from the previous 3 warrants. This is information that's being sought out by congressional investigators. Supposedly, there is going to be a meeting tomorrow involving the White House, DOJ, and congressional officials, in which the DOJ will hand over documents for congressional investigators to see. Don't hold your breath, the documents will actually be turned over tomorrow. But this is what Congress has been demanding now for weeks and months to see. What all was in the FISA applications? What evidence did the FBI present before the FISA court to get warrants to spy on Carter Page? And why are DOJ officials like Rod Rosenstein stonewalling Congress? The answer is simple. Because Rod Rosenstein signed off on a warrant that had phony and unverified evidence. Remember, the dossier continued to be used as the bulk of the FISA applications even after the initial warrant was granted in October 2016, and even after Christopher Steele was fired by the FBI for leaking dossier material to the media. Well, after the dossier was deemed to be salacious, James Comey announced last June that the FBI investigation into Donald Trump began at the end of July 2016, after the FBI learned of conversations George Papadopoulos had with Australian Ambassador Alexander Downer. Recall that in April 2016, Papadopoulos had met with British professor Joseph Mifsud. It was Mifsud who told Papadopoulos that the Russians had hacked Hillary's emails and was in possession of thousands of emails. A month later in London, while drunk in a bar, Papadopoulos is talking to Alexander Downer, the Australian ambassador to the UK, relaying the information he learned from Mifsud. Downer goes through channels within the Australian government to relay this to the FBI. We have learned that the FBI called the Trump investigation Crossfire Hurricane. But Papadopoulos, as well as Carter Page and Sam Clovis, had conversations with Stefan Halper, who has been outed as being the possible spy within the Trump campaign. It was in September of 2016 that Halper had sought Papadopoulos to write a policy statement concerning Cyprus and other countries in exchange for $3,000. Papadopoulos took the offer, wrote the statement, delivered it in early October 2016, and received the $3,000 payment. But it was during a meeting Papadopoulos had with Halper that is rather peculiar. Halper asked Papadopoulos, "You know about Russia getting Hillary's emails, right?" And Papadopoulos said he didn't know anything about it. Now, why would Halper ask Papadopoulos that question? Could it be that Halper was aware of the meetings Papadopoulos had with Mifsud and Downer? Then you have Carter Page, and this is where things are getting very interesting all of a sudden. When it became apparent that Trump was going to be the Republican nominee, the Washington Post demanded to see the different advisors Trump had brought on to the campaign, including his foreign policy advisors. And Trump revealed to the Washington Post on March 21, 2016, that Carter Page was one of his advisors. Now, the FBI already had information about Carter Page. He was interviewed by the FBI in 2013 as part of an investigation into a New York-based Russian spy ring. Sometime later in the spring of 2016, Loretta Lynch and James Comey discussed whether to tell the Trump administration about the possible Russian connections Carter Page had, but they declined to inform the Trump campaign. Now, very recently, former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper revealed that indeed there was spying on the Trump campaign, but they weren't spying on the campaign per se. They were looking into what the Russians were doing with the campaign. You want to talk about a crock. Why then didn't the intelligence community warn Donald Trump that there might be Russians involved with certain campaign officials? Instead, they spied on the campaign. Why? I surmise that they saw Trump as a threat and in no way wanted him to beat Hillary Clinton. Realized that at the same time all of this was going on, the FBI was investigating Hillary Clinton for having classified information on her private email server. The more James Clapper and others like James Comey talk, the bigger hole they're digging for themselves. So now the question is, given that the media was alerted to the presence of Carter Page in the Trump campaign in March 2016, what all was the FBI, CIA, and other agencies doing between then and July 31st, 2016, the date that James Comey had previously said was the time when the FBI started its investigation into Donald Trump? The investigation has only gotten bigger with more questions that need to be answered. Anyway, that's the Cliff Notes version of what we've learned in the last week when it comes to what the FBI, CIA, and others were doing to spy on the Trump campaign. I want to remind you to please check out my Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/Southern Conservative. That's facebook.com/Southern Conservative. There you will find links to conservative news articles on stories you may not hear about in the mainstream media. Plus, if you follow the news feed, you'll find links to the daily podcasts. Be sure to also subscribe to this YouTube channel and click on the notifications bell so you'll be alerted each time a new podcast has been posted. New podcasts are posted daily, Monday through Thursday. Now let's focus on Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General for the Department of Justice. The Inspector General has announced that he has drafted his report on the mishandling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Sources say this report will be just as explosive as the report on Andrew McCabe and his lying to officials within the FBI and the Inspector General's office. The report will supposedly slam the FBI for dragging its feet when it came to investigating emails that were found on Anthony Weiner's laptop in September 2016. Recall that Andrew McCabe knew about those emails for an entire month before James Comey announced he was reopening that investigation. Then we learned that Rod Rosenstein has directed Michael Horowitz to look at whether there was any impropriety or political motivations on the part of the FBI when it was investigating Donald Trump and his campaign. Now this is rich coming from Rosenstein because we know he signed off on the last FISA application in June 2017 to spy on Carter Page. So why is Rosenstein doing this? I surmise it's simply to buy time. Rosenstein has to be aware of his involvement in this whole thing. And look at just how long it's taken for the Inspector General to draft his report on the Hillary Clinton email investigation. The public won't see this report until sometime next month at the earliest, and it will surely contain redactions at the behest of the FBI and DOJ. The email investigation wrapped up just days before the 2016 presidential election. We're talking 18 months from the time of the election to now. The Inspector General's office has been tasked with investigating so much, it will take months before we ever get a report about the FBI investigation into Donald Trump. Besides, the Inspector General is limited to what he can do. He does not have subpoena power. He can't drag people in front of a grand jury. He can only investigate people who are still working at the DOJ. For those who have left the DOJ once Trump became president, Horowitz cannot talk to those people. He's just a watchdog for the department. And the investigation into Trump happened while Obama was still president. So Rosenstein full well knows what he's doing when he's making this request. And that's it for today. I'll be back on Thursday with another podcast, which will be the last one this week. Have a great day, everybody.